Hi! Before you watch the video, I wish to welcome you to the Song on Fire channel. Song on Fire is an authentic Catholic channel with a variety of content like music, interviews, and lifestyle videos. If you're someone looking to grow in your Catholic faith and wish to have an enriching fellowship, then this channel is for you. Please do subscribe and hit on the bell notification for updates. Now enjoy the video. God bless you.
So before we talk about anything, I just want you to introduce your family, and if you can name all your children.
Okay. My husband and I, we stay here in Saudi. He runs his own business. I'm a housewife. And we have six beautiful children. And their ages range from 13 to 1.5. My first is a boy. He's Michael. My second is a girl. She's Michelle. The third is a girl. It's Marilyn. The fourth is Matthew. The fifth is John. And the sixth is David. And the seventh is little Elizabeth.
Oh, it's a girl.
It's a girl.
Okay, cool. And when I put out the poster for our interview, Sheril, there was a lot of excitement and a lot of people were really awaiting to watch the interview because they had so many questions about being pro-life in today's world. So if you could just share about when you got married, what was your outlook towards children, and were you pro-life at that time?
At the time I got married, I was not consciously pro-life because it was, we decided to have three children at the time of marriage because there were three children in my family, there were three children in his family, and so we both grew up having a lot of fun with our siblings, and so we just thought it was a very fun idea to have three kids. And we did have our three kids, and then it was one boy and then two girls. And so we figured out that the boy, our son, is going to get a little lonely because that was the case in my family. I had a brother, and then we were two girls, two sisters. So I've grown up hearing him complain that you have her to play with, and he has no one to play with. And so we really wished for another son, and that's how we went on to have the fourth. Then after the fourth, it really wasn't in our plan to have a lot of kids, but we took it as it came, and every child has been a blessing. It's been a wonderful plan that's been rolling out in front of our eyes.
And you also told me that even when you got married, you had an issue with PCOS, and conceiving was not something that could have happened easily for you. How
Yes.
did you overcome that struggle?
Um, it was throughout my childhood I've been on the heavier side. So, but I was not aware that of the lifestyle issues that it could cause. It was only after marriage, in fact, the first month after marriage, that I found out that I had PCOS. And the doctor told me that it won't be easy to conceive. And the first thing that I had to do was to lose weight. And so we went about doing that, and we started the course of medicines that she prescribed for us. But apart from all that, we prayed, our families prayed, our friends prayed. And in the fourth month, after 4 months after the doctor told me that it would be difficult to conceive, I conceived. And the pregnancy was perfect. It was absolutely uneventful. It was a normal delivery, a healthy child. It was the best that I could hope for.
And after you had the fourth child, you reached your target of having four children, and you thought, it's well balanced. So after that, did you ever think of using contraception in your married life just to, plan pregnancy?
No, we never thought of using artificial contraception to plan the number of children that we had, because although we were not probably, super Catholic, hyper informed about the church, we knew that using artificial contraceptions was not in the church's agenda. It was against the law, and we knew that. So we never tried it. But I'll be honest, we never researched a lot into why it was prohibited. Just knew that yes, it's not allowed, so we're not going to use it. Why want to go against the church? It was that. But then later, we did read a lot about it because the pressures were growing from the people closest to us. No one would understand why we would want a, or why we would decide to have a fifth or a sixth child. And then, so that's when we started reading about the church's stand about sexuality within the marriage, about God's idea of a family, and all of that. So that's when we decided that artificial contraception is not the way to go. And how you view NFP is a huge part of the act itself, because no, it's not a contraception at all. It's not a contraception at all. For example, if you were to say that I have been using NFP for the last 30 years and I had only 2 kids, so it's a very successful method, then you've got it entirely wrong. You've got it entirely wrong. See, the purpose of NFP is to help you space your kids, rather than saying that's it. That's that's most number of kids I'm going to have. Because really, when you every single prayer, every single theory, or everything that you hear within the Catholic Church, even the prayer Our Father, we say, "Let Your will be done." And so, if you're not going to let His will be done in your married life, then where exactly are you going to let His will be done? You become the hypocrite that He talked about. So it was, for us, it was about allowing God's will to be done in our lives.
Was it, I mean, and this is another question, Sheril, like, most of the people who get married today, not both the spouses are online with this teaching, like, being pro-life. One person is comfortable, the other person wants to just have 2 kids or 3 kids maximum. So for you, was it a challenge to convince your husband, or like he had to convince you? What was it like?
I'll be really honest. He was the one who was really excited about having the 4th. And I was like, yeah, we'll have the 4th. Yeah, that's fine. And then every time the consequent pregnancies happened, he would be in total shock for about 3 or 4 days. And I'm like, what's the big deal really? Because he'd be in shock for 4 days, and when the child was born, he'd be the one who would be most excited. And all my children, all my 6 kids so far, the first word that they've said is Appa. And I'm like, where are all those children who learned to say Appa first? Really not with me. So for us, that was not really an issue, because we were both brought up in strictly Catholic families, and our faith formation, our foundations were laid over there. So for us to go consciously against the teaching of the church, I mean, there was, within the Catholic Church, there is no controversy about that teaching. It's crystal clear. You can read it anywhere. You can research all you want about it. To apply to it, to agree to it, you need to understand it. So if there is a problem agreeing to it, that means you haven't understood it well enough. And I think that's probably what happens between spouses these days, because they lack understanding.
And what if one spouse is really on board with the church teaching, like, but the other spouse is still not convinced and they don't want to go ahead with it? Then what would the right approach would be, Sheril?
The first step is to pray. The first step is to pray. The spouse who believes that it is right for them to have another child, or to be open to life, rather, that is the term. If one spouse is open to life and the other is not, I would encourage that spouse to pray for the other, because prayer really can work miracles, and it is the only thing that will get you forward. That is one thing. Second is to have open discussions about this. It's really to communicate. You need to sit down together. You need to talk. You need to put your feelings out in the open. See, probably the other partner has some other concerns about having another child that he or she has not shared with you. You need to go to those places. You need to find out why he or she is adamant about not having another child. What are these problems that person fears? Then you need to talk about it. It'll make you grow closer together as a couple. And then eventually, I do believe it is possible for one to win the other over. I'm not, it's going to be easy, but it is possible.
And especially in this area, because it is so connected with the sexual intimacy part, it could be emotionally traumatic for the other spouse who is not the spouse who is convinced to talk about these things to the person who is not convinced, can really take an emotional toll on you, right?
Right. That's why it's understanding is paramount, because we live in a world where sexual intimacy is a physical thing. It's that alone, and nobody tells you much more than that. The only bits and parts that you hear about it are probably in the pre-Kana courses, the courses that happen just before marriage. In 3 days, they tell you what you're supposed to do for the next for the rest of your life. Obviously, they cannot cover everything of everything. They cover bits and parts of whatever they can. But if you take your faith seriously, if you are willing to learn, then you can gain understanding about it. The Catholic Church's teaching about sexual intimacy has always been twofold. It is, of course, for the pleasure and companionship. It is the greatest love that a spouse can share with the other. But at the same time, procreation is an integral part of it. Now, the church is not saying that every time a couple is sexually intimate, it should result in offspring. That's not true. All that the church is saying is that you should never be saying no to the possibility of an offspring during sexual intimacy. But that is something you can learn, you can accept, only if you try to dig deeper into your faith.
And also, Sheril, like a lot of people who are thinking about marriage or in a relationship or going through that period of courtship or dating, do you think it's better that they talk about these things before marriage, or isn't it the right time to talk about it?
It probably is, but honestly, since I've not been through much of courtship, I'm not. I don't feel very equipped to speak about it. But yes, I do believe. When I think about it, I do believe that is probably the right time to think about, to talk about it, to have discussions.
And another challenge that couples with big families face is financial struggle, because that is a big concern when you think about having another child. So that was one question, like how do you manage your finance? Was finance ever a consideration when you conceived, or you were planning to get conceived?
Um, Finance was a concern. I'm not saying it was totally out of the picture. That would be foolish, because as responsible parents, you need to know how you're going to feed them or how you're going to provide for your kids. But while we did think about the finances, at the back of our minds, it was His word that says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness." So, with every child, you get the grace to provide for the child, and that includes finances. Back when we had only two kids, we were both in Bangalore, we were IT professionals, and that was that. It was after we moved to Saudi that we had our third child and forward. And ever since, my husband has had the same job. It's not like every time he had a new child, he went for a high-paying job. I was not true. We had the same job, but then things improved in our financial situations. Things improved, and the other thing was people have. I believe at least a lot of people who've talked to me, they have this feeling that one child takes X amount of money in the first year. So if you have two children, it will take 2x times, and then three kids, and then 3x, and then four kids, which is not really true. See, for our first child, when he was born, we had to buy everything from his first dress, his bottle, his first toy, his bedding, his everything. And we were so concerned about the company, the brand, the colors, texture, and everything. We were the typical new parents' anxiety. But now that my seventh child is almost here, I'll be really honest, we bought nothing for her. And that's, everything is there already. I have enough baby clothes to last her the first year of her life. I have enough bedding, I have enough diapers, I have enough of everything. I really don't have to buy anything for the next one. So, and that's true for a lot of things. A lot of things. It's not just when the child is born. See, when we had our first three kids, up until the third, it was like they're not very far apart. They're about a year and a half, 2 years apart. So when my third child was born, my eldest was around 4 or 5, something like that. So they were all at an age where I had to do everything for them. I had to bathe them, I had to feed them, I had to clean, I had to cook. So that was a little tough. And so everybody thinks that for even for the next child, you have to be doing everything for that child as well, and for the next, which is again not true. It's just as for these material things, even the sort of help or care that you have to provide for the child is not the same. Because when my fourth was born, I could leave him for at least a few minutes or maybe even an hour at a time with my son or my daughter and do something in the kitchen. Because even at that time, we were living by ourselves in an apartment over here in Saudi. So there was nobody else staying with us. And so instead of thinking of children as too many mouths to feed, you really should think of them as people who have two hands to help you out. And it does happen. It really does happen. And it's not. I tell you, it's not a conscious thing. I don't tell these kids that look, if the baby is crying and you have to look after the child if I'm not available at that particular moment. It really isn't that way. It really isn't that way because my sixth child, for example, I'm his mother, but then he probably thinks his sister is his mother as well. Because that's the way she takes care of him. And I really have not asked her to do that. They see, they observe, they learn, and above all, they love. Because a lot of people think sibling rivalry is something that will get in the way of this and it's going to affect their relationships. Probably the relationship of the child and the parent, and probably between the children. But I found the exact opposite thing. In fact, my oldest son, he tells me, we should have 10 kids. And then look after all of them. So it really isn't true. But then to know for sure that it is not true, there is really no other teacher other than experience. You have to go through it. See, I could go on, for hours and hours about what child, for example, what labor pains are. I could tell another lady, see, labor pains are like this and like that, and it lasts like this and that. But then if it's a person who's never been through it, she's never going to understand what I'm saying to her. It's exactly the same with having children, having more children. If I told you that it's not not the sort of hell that you think it is, you're probably going to find it hard to believe me. And I understand that, but then you have to go through it too.
And also, Cheryl, the another important thing is, being emotionally available for all your children and being able to love them equally. Because, as married people, spouses feel exhausted just being emotionally available for their spouse. And on top of that, having so many children could be, emotionally, exhausting, right? And you said something very interesting. Could you share how you are able to love all your children and being available for them emotionally all the time?
Right. See, I believe that when we read that we are created in God's image, it also means that we have a God's capacity to love. God the Father, He loves all these millions and billions of people equally. And He is able to do that. So obviously, we should be having that capacity, at least towards our children. Ideally, we should be having it towards everyone around us. But even if not that, we are capable of sharing the same sort of love with all our children. For example, our first was born. We were really excited. We were everything that new parents are. But even for the seventh child, even when I tell you that we have not bought material things for her, we have just learned that there is a slight complication in my pregnancy because I have what is called liver cholestasis. And there is a slight risk for the baby. And so I'm going to meet the doctor after this. But the sort of concern that we have for little Elizabeth is my daughter, it's just the same that I would have had about Michael or Michelle or Marilyn. It doesn't change. The love doesn't change. We always have space for more love. We are capable of more love. The only thing that limits it is our thoughts about our capacity to love. Where you put an end to it is where you think you stop. But that really isn't true.
I have actually seen that, face to face with one of my friends, and she has 5 children. So I actually lived with them for a few months in their home, and I thought, like, she also has 5 children. I mean, she wouldn't be available for anybody else. But she was so generous, and her heart was so expanded that she could, individually take care of the 5 children, her husband, and also, other friends equally. So, the more people come into your life, I think God expands your heart and makes it more generous. Would you agree?
Yes, it is absolutely true because it is all based on love. Where there is love, there is space for another person, there is space for everything else in your life. You learn to set your priorities, you learn to complain less, you learn to see the little joys that you have, to appreciate what you have, to count your blessings, to be happier, really. It's all about love. That's why when children are born out of love, there really isn't space for. There probably is some instant of time where you think about all these things, but in the long run, that's not how it works. It's love that wins.
I have 2 more questions, Cheryl. Can I go ahead? Or you're
Yeah.
getting tired or anything?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. So the other question is, Cheryl, one person asked me, like, when you have so many children, how do you have time for yourself and time for your spouse and time for God? Isn't it, too much for you to handle?
I believe it's about getting your priorities right. See, back when we had our first child, I was complaining that I couldn't sleep in the night. I had I was complaining about every single thing every single day. But then now I realize that my first priority as a person in this world, for me right now, it's about being a mother. It's God first and my family second. But those are my priorities. And so, if on a particular day I don't have time to spend in front of the mirror, I'm not complaining about that. Or I don't have time to go shopping with my friends, I'm not complaining about that because those are not my priorities. I've changed my priorities, and um, but that is something you learn over time. I'm not saying that I was like that for my first or my second child. I remember for my first child when he'd wake up in the night and cry and he had to have a nappy change or he had to be fed, or whatever. My husband and I would be like, "You do it. You, I did it last time. Why don't you do it?" It was that. It was more of trying to be equals because that's what our idea of equals at the time was. I change it 5 times, you change it 5 times. Okay, now we are equal. but but now I've learned that. See, for example, with this baby, I believe that there are so many people on this earth, so many billions of people on this planet, and there are so many of them who are probably in a better position to provide for this child, probably financially or socially or in whatever other way. But for some very special reason, God has chosen me to be the mother of this child. And that is a privilege. That is a blessing. That is an honor, really, because it's the King of the world who has chosen me to be the mother of this child. What more could I ask for? And so, every time that I'm able to do something for this child, it is a blessing beyond words, really. So that's how I choose to see it. So as a couple, that's how we've matured. So now it's like if the diaper needs to be changed, or if some child has puked, or somebody gets up in the night, it's not about you do it and I do it. It's rather go, you can sleep. I'll do it if you like, and then probably I'll be the one who says no. Get some sleep. I'll do it because you have to go to office in the morning. You have to go for your work. Whereas I could probably catch a small nap somewhere during the day. So that's how we've changed.
And the last challenge for big families, Cheryl, as you might know, the people outside and inside, I mean, in your inner circle, outside circle, people constantly commenting and trying to tell you that you're crazy, you're mad, or all those things. And in fact, I had this conversation with one of the population control advocate, like, one person who is saying, population should be controlled and all that. Then I asked him, would you kill your own child to, make sure that the population is under control? So then come and preach to me how I should control, how Catholics should, control having children. So, how do you face, a black backlash from family members or friends or otherwise?
Again, I think it comes down to priorities. There are two people's opinions that I really value in my life, and every other opinion is secondary or it doesn't affect me at all, and that's the truth. One of those people is the one who said to me that he will be there with me till death do us part, and that is my husband. I care for his opinion. The second is the opinion of my God, who says he will be with me to the end of the age. And if these two people tell me the same thing, then I really have no more room for conflict, and the other opinions don't really bother me. There was a time when I used to retaliate, when those comments, like you said, they used to sting. I thought maybe there was something wrong with us, or maybe we were just the odd ones out. But now, honestly, when I hear these things, they don't affect me in a negative way. Quite on the contrary, I sympathize with these people for their lack of understanding, their for really what they're letting go. They don't know what they've missed. They don't know what they've lost. It's really sad for me that way when I hear these comments. But otherwise, see, if I were to have an eighth child, if that is God's plan, we are still open to it. We are not going to say no. And people's comments are really not going to bother us in the same way that it did some time back. So that's one thing. And about people worrying about population explosion, that's something that we have been told about, or people have tried to talk to us about it. They should really read about something that is quite the opposite. It's called population implosion. And that is the reality that is happening in a lot of European countries, in the developed world. For example, in Japan, in most of Europe, even in Kerala, you do not have the fertility rate of 2.1 that is required to keep the population stable. And that is what is actually happening. And people don't want to see that part of the story because this is more comfortable. This can justify your decision of having only two children. So that's really, I think that they're looking for the easy way out.
And for all the couples, Cheryl, who are getting married right now, or who are married in couples, and they are still, challenged in this area, and they are not able to let go and surrender and accept God's will, what would you tell them to, see the beauty in this?
I think the first step is to understand is that your marriage is not just between you and your spouse. This presence of the third person is true. It's not a fairy tale. It's not an imaginary thing. It's not that way. There are three people in your marriage. The first step is to recognize that there is you, there is your spouse, and there is God who brought you together. So we are human beings. My husband and I, we are humans. We are not angels who got married. We've had problems with each other. Little problems, big problems, the squabbles, the fights, everything, all the usual stuff. But I believe that if we have been able to stay together for 14 years as a couple and be able to raise the family that we do, it's simply because there is Jesus in between us who makes sure that I am able to be the wife that he wants and he's able to be the husband that I want. It is not because of my own capabilities it's not only my own doing. Of course, I try, but that's not enough. Unless you have the grace to be what you have to be at the moment, you will not be able to, do that. So the first is to recognize that God is there in your marriage. and you just have to recognize His presence. And once you do, it becomes easier to surrender, because once you realize what He is, who He is, what He is capable of, how much He loves you, above all, how much He loves you, and what He is willing to do for you, then it becomes easier to surrender yourself to Him.
You know, Sheril, when I told people that you're due in 10 days, and I've said, I've planned this interview, people were saying, you unemotional, inconsiderate person, how can you ask a pregnant woman to do the interview? Then I said it was her idea to do the interview before delivery. So, I should really appreciate your courage and your willingness to do this interview, Sheril. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And really, it's not courageous to say yes before the delivery. After the delivery is where it takes real courage.
Okay.
But before the delivery, I wouldn't be available. That's why I agreed to today. And the pleasure was really mine. It was a joy talking to you.
Thank you. And I hope this, interview would be a blessing for people who are struggling in this area. And it is it's surprising that most of our Catholic faithful, still struggle in this area. And it's a challenge for them, and they're not able to see the beauty of the church teaching in this area. It's a big deal. I think this interview will be a great blessing for that.
Hi, I'm so glad you're watching the Song on Fire YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the channel for more Catholic interviews, music, and lifestyle videos. If you feel inspired, click on the Patreon link to contribute and support the Song on Fire Catholic Ministries. God bless.